In the fall of 1919, a group of black sharecroppers in Arkansas met inside a small church to talk about one thing: getting paid fairly for the cotton they'd grown. Within days, an unknown number of them were dead. Some estimates run into the hundreds. And here's the part that should stop you cold. For decades afterward, you could open an American history textbook, read it cover to cover, and never once find out it happened. Not a footnote, not a line. It was as if the whole thing had been lifted clean out of the country's memory. By the end of this, you're going to understand something most people never learn in school. That Black History Month didn't start as a celebration. It started as a rescue mission. One man looked at what American textbooks were teaching and what they were quietly leaving out, and he realized an entire people were being written out of their own country's story. His name was Carter G. Woodson. And to understand why he did what he did, you have to understand what he saw. So let's go find the thing the textbooks refuse to print. Most people, if they know the name at all, know Carter G. Woodson as the father of Black History Month. And that part's true. In February 1926, he launched Negro History Week, timed around the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Decades later, it grew into the month we mark every February. So the popular version goes like this: a kind scholar wanted to give Black Americans something to feel proud of. Heroes, inventors, achievements. A feel-good story about representation. That's the version you usually get. And it's not wrong exactly, but it's missing the anger underneath it. Woodson was the son of formerly enslaved parents. He worked in the coal mines of West Virginia as a young man and didn't finish high school until he was in his 20s. Then he kept going. In 1912, he earned a doctorate in history from Harvard. Think about that for a second. A miner's son, born in 1875 with a Harvard PhD. He was only the second Black American to earn one there, after W.E.B. Du Bois. And when he got inside these elite academic rooms, he found something that troubled him deeply. The scholarship itself was built to leave his people out. In 1915, Woodson helped found the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. A year later, he launched the Journal of Negro History. His whole method was simple and stubborn. Go to the documents, court records, census rolls, letters, newspaper archives. He wanted history that could be checked, sourced, footnoted, so no one could wave it away as feeling or folklore. And when he applied that method to what was happening in the American South while he was building his career, he ran into events that the textbook writers seemed determined not to see. One of them had just happened in Arkansas. Elaine, Arkansas. October 1919, Black sharecroppers in Phillips County were organizing. They'd formed a union to push for a fair share of what their cotton was worth because the planters who controlled the land also controlled the accounting, and the accounting always seemed to leave the workers in debt. On the night of September 30th, a meeting was held at a church near Elaine. Union members posted guards outside because they'd been threatened before. Then a car pulled up. Shots were fired. A white man was killed. And what happened next was not a fight between two sides. It was something far more one-sided. Word spread that Black residents were, quote, insurrecting. Armed white men poured into the county, some from neighboring states. Federal troops were called in, and over the next several days, Black men, women, and children were hunted across the Arkansas Delta. The exact death toll has never been settled. Some historians estimate that more than 100 African Americans were killed. Others put the number far higher, into the hundreds. The record genuinely does not resolve it, and that uncertainty is part of the point. when bodies aren't counted, when no careful inquiry is allowed, the erasure begins right there, in the silence. Now here's where it gets stranger. After the killing stopped, nobody was charged for the deaths of those black residents. Instead, 12 black men were sentenced to death, and dozens more were sent to prison, accused of starting the whole thing. A grand jury moved fast. So did the juries at trial. Some verdicts reportedly came back in minutes. And this is the detail that should make you sit up. The men convicted weren't just victims of the massacre. They were being blamed for it. The official story had flipped the whole event upside down, but that official story was about to meet a courtroom that didn't buy it. The convictions were challenged, and the fight went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In 1923, in the case Moore versus Dempsey, the court ruled that a trial dominated by a mob atmosphere, where the outcome was a foregone conclusion, could violate a defendant's constitutional rights. It was a genuine landmark, and it helped save the men known as the Elaine 12 from execution. So the massacre did leave a legal fingerprint on American history. The Supreme Court itself acknowledged something had gone badly wrong in that courtroom. And yet somehow the event that started it all still slid out of the national memory. So think about what Carter Woodson was looking at, a massacre with a death toll no one would honestly count. Trials that convicted the victims, a Supreme Court case that admitted the process was rotten, all of it documented in court records, in newspapers, in the pages of his own journal, and the ones that came after it. And then he'd open a school textbook, and the whole thing would be gone, not disputed, not softened, gone. That's the pattern he saw again and again, not one event buried, but a method of burying. And that method is what he set out to break. Here's what really happened, and it's bigger than any single town. Woodson understood that history isn't just what occurred. It's what gets written down, taught, and repeated. Control the textbook, and you control what a nation believes about itself. He wrote about this directly. In his 1933 book, The Miseducation of the Negro, he argued that schools were teaching black children to admire everyone but themselves, by feeding them a version of the past where their people had done nothing and suffered nothing worth recording. Negro History Week wasn't a party. It was a corrective, a way to force the erased material back into the room. And he was strategic about it. He didn't ask people to trust him. He gave them documents. His association published research, distributed lesson materials, and pushed teachers to use primary sources. The whole idea was that if the facts were sourced and checkable, they couldn't be dismissed as bias. Elaine was exactly the kind of story that method was built for. Court records existed, newspaper accounts existed, the Supreme Court ruling existed. The evidence was sitting there in the archives the entire time. The only thing missing was anyone willing to put it in front of a classroom. Woodson's answer was to build the machine that would. So why was it hidden in the first place? Follow the incentives. In the Arkansas Delta, the people who profited from sharecropping also shaped the local story, and that story needed the killing to look like a suppressed uprising rather than a massacre. Blaming the victims wasn't just cruelty. It protected the system that produced the wealth, and nationally, the textbook industry of that era mostly served a white readership that preferred a triumphant, untroubled version of the American past. A careful account of Elaine didn't sell, didn't flatter, and didn't fit, so it was left out, erasure by omission, quiet and deniable. And omission is the perfect crime because it leaves no fingerprints. Nobody has to burn a document. Nobody has to lie outright. You simply don't include it, and a generation grows up not knowing there was anything to include. That's what made Woodson's work so radical. He wasn't correcting a single wrong sentence. He was attacking the empty space where the truth should have been. He once said the object of his life's work was to prevent a people from becoming, in his words, a negligible factor in the thought of the world. Elaine was a negligible factor, according to the textbooks. He refused to accept that. But I want to be honest about what the record still doesn't settle, because that honesty is the whole point of this channel. We do not know how many people died at Elaine. Estimates range from over 100 into the hundreds, and historians still disagree. We don't have a complete, verified list of names. The number of white men killed is not something the available records clearly establish either. And exactly who fired first that night at the church remains contested in the accounts. These aren't gaps I'm inventing to add mystery. They're gaps that exist because the event was never properly investigated at the time. That failure is itself part of the story. What we can say is that in the years since, the effort Woodson started refused to let Elaine stay silent. Historians returned to the court records. Descendants and researchers pushed the story back into public view. A memorial was eventually dedicated in Phillips County. The massacre that vanished from the textbooks now has scholarship, monuments, and museum attention. It took the better part of a century, but the record won. And that slow victory is the proof of Woodson's whole theory. History isn't fixed, it's fought over. And what ends up in the textbook depends entirely on who's willing to do the fighting. So in 2026, when the country marks 100 years since Woodson launched that first week, remember what it actually was. Not a celebration handed down from on high. A miner's son with a Harvard degree, staring at the empty pages of a nation's textbooks, deciding that Omission was a lie he would not let stand. Black History Month began as an act of recovery, aimed straight at the silence. And the massacre at Elaine is one of the things it pulled back out of the dark. That's the dark reason behind a month most people think they understand. If this changed how you'll think about that little February square on the calendar, then do the thing Woodson spent his life asking people to do. Don't just take it on faith, go check the record. The court case Moore versus Dempsey is real and you can read it. The journal he founded is real. And follow this channel because next time we're pulling apart another story, the textbooks decided you didn't need to know. There's a disaster hiding behind an official all clear, and the memo that could have stopped it was dated long before anyone died.